in the midst of a huge transformation where peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am very excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Alanna Flax-Clark. She is the Athlete Services Grant Specialist at USOPC, the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. Alanna, thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little bit about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns and when you were younger, do you remember how exactly you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Well, thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Alanna Flax-Clark, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. I think I would answer that in multiple ways, depending on the day you asked me. I think I envision myself in many different roles. My great-grandfather opened a business, which he passed down to the generation. So I grew up in a retail store a lot of the times growing up. It was first a house painting store, and then as the economy changed, turned into one of the premier art supply stores, and then turned into fine pens and stationery and gifts. But because of it being an art supply store, I grew up around a lot of very talented artists and musicians and singers, so a lot of creative people. And also like actors and actresses. We had Peter Falk, who played Columbo, Joni Mitchell, one of my favorite musicians. And all these people just treated me, like I was their best friend. So of course, depending on who came in that day, I thought I could be, the next big singer. And of course I can't sing, or an actor or an actress or whoever came in that day. And so they all inspired me to be, the most creative person in the world. And just by nature of growing up in an art supply store, I had access to the best art supplies and got to try out everything. And all the companies would send samples in for me to try. And so that was just an amazing experience. And I also got to grow up with my family in the business. My grandma would teach me more of the back end of the business with the books, doing the accounting. So I got to spend a lot of time with her. My grandpa, he was more of an entrepreneurial type. And he would take me on these adventures. We'd go out early in the day, come back late at night just to see new products or who knows what, but spending that time with him and learning things was really cool. He also had a penchant for helping people. So he would take people sometimes just off the street and give them jobs, and teach them, more of the retail end of stuff so they could have a job and make a living. My mom and dad taught me more of the customer service side, really all ends of the business. But, in second grade, I was making sales that would range from $5 to thousands of dollars. And so, because of all these aspects, like I said, some days I wanted to be in business, some days I wanted to be an artist. And I also had, the penchant, like my grandfather and both of my parents, really all my family, for helping people. So I remember in middle school, my friend and I started a business called A&A Babysitters. And we made our own business cards. We did everything, the marketing, and went around to everyone in the neighborhood. And that continued on in middle school and high school. I always volunteered in areas where I could help people. And same on to college, where I went in thinking I wanted to be pre-med, but eventually decided to get my master's in special education because I really thought I would have more hands-on time with the kids I was working with. And so, again, like I said, depending on the day you asked me, I wanted to be a million things, but it all really rooted to, I think, being more centered around people.
Incredible. I love it. It sounds like a lot of helping people, a lot of creativity and entrepreneurial spirits as common threads in what you wanted to be. You fast forward to today, you are at the USOPC and you are doing a lot of great work. How do you think your personal journey has really led you up until this point in your career?
Yeah, well, after I acquired my disability, as I said, I was a teacher for many years. So after I acquired my disability, I had to decide if I could go back to teaching in the classroom. Would I be accepted as someone with a disability? Could I physically get into the schools and into the classroom? Most of the schools I had taught in, I could not get into. There were steps to get into the buildings and other barriers that would not allow me to get into unless they made adaptations to the buildings. I also taught a population of students with disabilities who also had behaviors that needed to be addressed throughout the day. So I didn't really feel it would be safe for me or the students, as I would need help with that aspect. And I wasn't sure what I would do at first or what I would be good at besides teaching. It really took some time to realize that education and teaching are incorporated into many things and don't have to take place in the traditional classroom setting. I've done a number of things, but they all come back to my passion for education and devotion to inclusion. I always felt the need to be an ally to people with disabilities. But once I was really thrown into the situation myself as being a person with disability, it created a stronger desire to bring about more awareness. So, I currently serve as the Athlete Services Grant Specialist at the USOPC, and my job is to help find educational opportunities and funding the grants for Team USA athletes. And also, as an athlete myself, this is really a passion of mine. So I also help out with collaborating on career opportunities for these athletes. No matter what I'm working on, I also develop inclusion opportunities and strategies for Team USA athletes and facilitate opportunities that support the organization's DE&I initiatives. And then in my free time, I serve as a speaker on Respectability's National Speaker Bureau and as a freelance writer and disability inclusion advocate for TD Bank. So this kind of combines, all my passions into, one nice package.
Absolutely. It sounds like you're doing a lot of work that you are really passionate about, making an impact in a lot of different areas. And I want to talk about your disability advocacy and your experience as a speaker, developing inclusion programs as well. I believe there was a stat that said there's an estimate of 3 to 26 million Americans have visible or hidden disabilities, so we can't see it. Also, as you shared as well, the disability community is the only minority group that anyone can be a part of at any point in their life as well. Where do you think we are as a society in really destigmatizing, talking, taking steps to make the workplace more accessible? You gave the example of teaching, which was far behind in terms of the schools as well. So I want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think we're definitely still far behind where we need to be. Disabled people are the largest underrepresented group in society, and even more so in the workplace. While some people have no choice but to disclose their disability because it is so visible, there are those people who have a non-visible disability, and they can live in fear that their disability will be discovered. You can think of non-visible disabilities being things like ADHD, mental health conditions, diabetes, and many others. And these people have to decide when, whether, and with whom to share their disability status. And this can be like really a big burden for these people. Even though the ADA explicitly prohibits disability-based discrimination, the abstract reality of employee protection clauses belies the day-to-day work experience, in which a dominant work culture may explicitly signal, if not explicitly encourage, conformity. And people have many reasons for hiding their identities. They may fear teasing or harassment. They worry their relationships with coworkers will change. Many even express concerns that their manager might see them as lazy or less capable, and that their career progress will stall as a result. I do think we've made progress and that things will continue to change for the better. As a group, disabled people are very vocal and willing to speak up for their needs, and we are too diverse and talented of a group to not see further progress made.
Absolutely. No group is a monolith, and there is a lot of progress that can be made on a systemic level as well to ensure that we're being more inclusive and that spaces are more accessible in a really intentional way as well. And so people feel comfortable kind of coming to work and sharing or not sharing their disability with folks as well. Can you tell me about your passion for really bringing awareness to how sports and an active lifestyle can positively impact people with disabilities, defining that role and what you wish people would know about it?
Yeah, I mean, sports are important for all people, but for disabled people, it's extremely important that sports are made accessible. You know, participation in sports at any level increases self-esteem, encourages independence, and enhances a positive quality of life. The unique ability of sports to transcend linguistic, cultural, and social barriers makes it an excellent platform for strategies of inclusion and adaptation. The universal popularity of sports and its physical, social, and economic development benefits make it an ideal tool for fostering the inclusion and well-being of people with disabilities. You know, it can also help reduce the stigma and discrimination associated with disability because it transforms community attitudes about disabled people by really highlighting their skills and reducing the tendency to see the disability instead of the person, to see the disability instead of the person. And through sport, disabled people interact with other people with disabilities in a positive context, forcing them to reshape assumptions about what their disabilities allow them to do and not do. I think sport also changes the person with a disability by empowering them to realize their full potential and advocate for changes in society. Through sport, people also acquire vital social skills, like I mentioned, develop independence, and become empowered to act as agents of change. It teaches individuals how to effectively communicate, and it also shows them the significance of teamwork and cooperation and respect for others. It also contributes to developing greater independence by helping to become physically and mentally stronger. And these skills can be transferred to other areas, including employment and advocacy work, to help further build self-sufficiency. You also see the importance in sport with disabled women. Disabled women often experience double discrimination on the basis of their gender and disability. And by providing women with disabilities the opportunities to compete and demonstrate their physical ability, sport can really help reduce gender stereotypes and negative perceptions. And for me, you know, there's no doubt that the horses in my life have changed me emotionally and physically. They've improved my core strength, balance, fitness, and focus. More than that, though, they really allowed me to find my voice and speak again, increase my self-confidence, and allowed me to participate in life. I went from being shy and unsure of who I was to finding a new passion that allowed me to explore life again. Instead of staying home all day, I started to hang out with friends. I began to do my own laundry and cook my own meals. I mean, now I might not want to do my own laundry and cook my own meals all the time, but I really strive for the independence I once had. You know, and as I transitioned from therapy to sport, I discovered more of my independence and was able to get my driver's license again. And I even learned how to drive an adaptive vehicle. I applied for jobs and I discovered who I was as an individual with a disability. The skills I learned through sport and working with horses transferred over to everyday life. And I was once again learning to smile and enjoy life.
I mean, it sounds like there are incredible flywheel effects of really finding your voice, which is incredible, and also connecting with folks in the community as well. I know we talked about the group of folks with disabilities is really diverse, and no group again is a monolith, but we really want to be specific around how we can make workplaces more accessible and better. I've read some articles that companies that are fully virtual are better because they offer stipends for more accommodation in your homes and People don't have to disclose their physical or hidden disability, and you don't have to have those conversations if you don't want to with your coworkers as well. But then on the other hand, I've heard folks actually do want to go into the office as well. What do you want to see from employers to make their virtual or in-person workplaces more accessible?
Yeah, well, it really is advantageous for a business to promote equity, tolerance, and management of disability in the workplace. I love this study by Accenture and Disability In from 2018. It reports that companies embracing practices that support and encourage individuals with disabilities in the workplace saw their bottom line improve. Strong DE&I practices were associated with a 28% increase in revenue, double the net income, and a 30% boost in economic profit margin compared with their peer companies that scored lower on DE&I practices. So there's no reason that employers shouldn't promote these practices. And it's important to remember that since the passage of the ADA in 1990, employers have to make sure that they do not discriminate against job candidates or employees on the basis of an individual's disability. Interestingly, a study by the Job Accommodation Network, or JAN, shows that accommodations in the workplace provide consistent employer benefits over time with minimal costs. The study found that providing accommodations to individuals in the workplace resulted in such benefits as retaining valuable employees, improving productivity and morale, reducing worker compensation and training costs, and improving company diversity. Most employers in the study reported that the accommodations they provided had zero cost. And when accommodations did involve costs, the amount typically was only $500. So really not very much in the scheme of things. Since HR is responsible for ensuring that the talents and skills of all employees are leveraged, they can and should hold leaders accountable for employing people with disabilities. And HR should determine how their organizations, leaders, and managers view people with disabilities. If barriers in the workplace prevent any employee from succeeding, they have a responsibility to address those issues. So HR should be knowledgeable about the requirements for and the methods of achieving accessibility in the workplace for people with disabilities. And they should be familiar with methods of recruiting, interviewing, and retaining disabled employees. The Job Accommodation Network, or JAN, which I mentioned earlier, provides free consulting services to employers on all aspects of job accommodations, including the accommodation process, accommodation ideas, product vendors, and referral to other resources and ADA compliance assistance. So JAN is a great resource. An organization that employs people with disabilities should also make sure the concept of accessibility underlies its candidate selection process. And the US Department of Labor offers online guidance and a checklist for employers that want to evaluate the accessibility of their facilities for candidates who have disabilities. And these considerations include things such as, are parking spaces close to the worksite entrance? Or is the human resource office accessible? And now since COVID, you have to also look at these online considerations as well. And as we know, people with disabilities have higher unemployment rates than people without disabilities. One reason for this is the common misconception that disabled people can't contribute to the workplace. The duty of the employer is to educate the managers and their employees on things such as different forms of disabilities, the rights of people with disabilities in the workplace, and how to make the workplace more accessible and therefore more inclusive. With the proper training, disabled people can thrive in the workplace as long as they also have the proper accommodations. These accommodations can include things like removing physical barriers. So are parking spaces reserved for people with disabilities? Do you have doorways and entrances that are easily accessible to wheelchairs? And just in general, is there ample space in your offices and in the lobbies of your buildings? Make use of assistive technology. This can include things like screen reader software, color-coded keyboards, speech recognition software, and even sign language apps. Look for assistive devices. And this can be something as simple as a height adjustable desk. The next two are more common, I think, and talked about a lot more since COVID. So ensure flexible hours in remote work and provide a less stressful or low stim workplace. So you see a lot of places nowadays implementing meditation stations and encouraging frequent breaks. Another thing you could think about is installing dimmers for lights, and even noise canceling headphones are helpful for people. And something that everywhere should do is just revise the company culture so it is more accessible and inclusive, and be proactive about accessibility. So provide continued education about various forms of disability and keep the equipment and assistive technology up to date. And in general, this helps everybody, but focus on health and well-being. And again, if you are, not just only if you are, but especially now that people are having more remote work, make sure your website and anything online is accessible.
I mean, I think those are some really great examples that people can really do tomorrow. They can really start thinking about as well to make intentional change that all bubbles up to the company culture as well, being aware, being proactive around accessibility as well. You mentioned a couple resources and the checklist. I know that oftentimes employers are looking for rubrics to see, where can I not only meet the mark and be at par, but go above and beyond, right? So Human Rights Campaign has their annual Corporate Equality Index, which has a criteria for employers who support and empower LGBTQIA plus employees. B corporations have a strict criteria around measuring the company's entire social and environmental impact as well. What would you say is a benchmark or rubric for employers' accessibility? Is it the checklist that you talked about, or do you recommend other resources?
Yeah, I think there are two that stand out. One of the biggest benchmarking tools for disability inclusion is Disability-In's Disability Equality Index. And this helps companies build a roadmap of measurable, tangible actions that they can take to achieve disability inclusion and equality. Each company receives a score on a scale of 0 to 100, with those earning 80 and above recognized publicly as the best place to work for disability inclusion. Another one is the National Organization on Disability Employment Tracker, and it's just another tool to help companies better evaluate the effectiveness of their disability inclusion policies and practices.
Awesome. We will link those in the show notes as well, so folks can check those out too. In terms of, I know people use words like accompliceship and allyship. What do you hope that people start talking about in regards to being good accomplices to the disability community? If you are in HR, if you are in a formal or informal leadership role as a peer, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, there are like 1.5 billion people on the planet with disabilities. And allyship is an important part of making the world more inclusive and accessible. Allyship is a practice that needs ongoing work and focus. It's not a one and done deal. There are a number of things that you can do to be a good ally to the disability community. I think the first thing is educate yourself. Learn about different models of disability. Understand what ableism is and how to detect it. Discover the million reasons why accessibility matters. There are tons of resources out there, from podcasts to books, documentaries to talks, social media, and more. Go out there and immerse yourself in all those resources. A second thing I'd say is respect individual experiences. Recognize that every person is different, and there are a variety of ways that disability is experienced. Listen to each story and understand that not everyone has the same views and preferences. Third, we've been talking about this a lot. Make accessibility and inclusion a part of your everyday life. This is something we've also been talking about. Hire and promote people with disabilities. Remember, inclusion is not just about representation, but also equity and opportunity. And then last, I'll say advocate proactively. Speak up when you come across ableist actions, language, or behaviors. You don't have to have a disability to be part of the movement. Remember, becoming a good ally is a process and a journey. Understand that you will make mistakes, but know that it's better to be an imperfect ally than nothing at all.
Absolutely. And allyship is not something that you do on Monday, and then if you feel like it on Wednesday, and then let's throw it again on Friday. It is an ongoing process. It's an ongoing journey, but you need to take those intentional steps to be an ally every day. Really take that education piece to heart, and also speak up and as well in these conversations too. You mentioned that you're also a speaker on Respectability's National Speaker Bureau. Have you seen any patterns about how leaders and organizations are reaching out to you to speak at their company? And if so, what are those patterns?
Yeah, I think in general, greater and more diverse organizations want to learn and bring awareness to their teams about topics such as inclusion, accessibility, and disability awareness. Education and awareness is the first step to change. So taking this initiative to want to learn is a big step forward. Advocating for equal access for people with disabilities is a passion of mine. Did you know that 1 in 4 adults living in the United States have some form of disability? And the work done under the guise of accessibility benefits many more people than first considered, thanks to what is referred as the curb cut effect. Curb cuts are the little slopes from a pavement to the road, usually at designated crossings. They are so ubiquitous nowadays that you'd probably take them for granted. But it wasn't long ago that pavements ended abruptly at the roadside, making it difficult for wheelchair users to cross safely. But thanks to activists like Ed Roberts and John Hassler, who campaigned to get the curb cuts implemented in their local area, and a wave of activism supporting the disability rights movement in the decades that followed, curb cuts today are mandatory in many countries. The great thing about curb cuts is that everyone benefits, not only people in wheelchairs. Parents pushing strollers head straight for the curb cuts. So do workers pushing, heavy carts, people wheeling luggage, even runners and skateboarders. A study of pedestrian behavior revealed that 9 out of 10 unencumbered pedestrians go out of their way to use a curb cut. So having an accessible world is not just good for people with disabilities, but for all people. And the organizations, businesses, and people wanting to learn more about these DE&I initiatives are similar to the unveiling of the curb cut. Once they have access to the information, I hope they'll head straight for it and want more and more, and it will become included in their everyday life.
Accessibility is literally great for everyone, and it's not only the right thing to do, but as you stated before, also it is better for your business as well, and for just it's a win-win situation. So it's something that people should be proactive about. Alanna, is there anything that I didn't ask you want to share with folks who are listening, or underscoring a couple key takeaways that we discussed here today?
I think in general, I just feel in life there's no challenge that's too hard to overcome. As long as you put in the work, anything's possible. For me, this took finding my passion through sports and an active lifestyle. Find that thing that makes you feel proud and comfortable in your skin. Really, what makes you feel like you can go out and shine.
I love it. Alanna, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, and as a reminder for folks who are listening, at AllVoices, we really believe in employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood, and know it's a requirement for the business to really succeed overall. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.